Okay, thanks, Arena, and thanks to all of you who submitted for the Student Modeler Award competition. We had a fantastic set of submissions. Um, we don't give everybody an award, but they were all really great. Okay, so next we move on to the Lifetime Achievement Award, and let me first read what this is for, and then I'm going to read the citation. But then, before our winner this year can collect his award, we need to pass through a kind of a review, kind of a last minute review process, before we can get full acceptance for publication. And the review is going to be done by 3 reviewers who will not be anonymous, but they will be coming up to tell you a little bit about Brad. And in fact, one of them is Brad's former advisor, and 2 are former students. So we'll see how that goes. But here's the deal. Since 2010, the CSDMS Lifetime Achievement Award has been bestowed for outstanding and sustained achievements in Earth surface processes modeling research and service contributions to the global CSDMS community. So let me tell you about our award winner this year, Professor Brad Murray of Duke University. So Professor Brad Murray is recognized for his innovative and insightful research on Earth surface dynamics, as well as for his long-standing contributions to community modeling and community science. Professor Murray has explored a wide range of geophysical systems and environments, from deserts to rivers to deltas and coasts. By viewing these environments as complex, nonlinear systems, his work has illuminated how large-scale patterns and dynamics emerge from small-scale process feedbacks. Professor Murray has been both a champion and an innovator of simple, elegant models that capture the essence of a dynamic system without overcomplicating it. Through that approach, he has demonstrated the value of computational models, not just for simulating nature, but more importantly, for understanding it. Professor Murray has also pioneered the integration of human and natural systems through investigations of how water, sediment, ecosystems, and human behavior effectively create coupled systems with their own dynamics. In addition to his research, Professor Murray has been a steadfast champion of open source community models and modular modeling systems. He served both as a founding group chair and later as steering committee chair for CSDMS. And Professor Murray is professor of geomorphology and coastal processes and director of graduate studies in the Division of Earth and Ocean Science in the Nicholas School of the Environment and Earth Sciences at Duke University. Okay, and there you can read about. There we go. Okay, I was looking at the wrong thing. Okay, and yeah. So I now invite the 3 reviewers, starting with Evan. The only trick here is to kind of hold it.
Yeah, for sure. Brad, you look great in that photo. Where are you? Oh, here. Great. Hi, everybody. I'm Evan. I was Brad's student from 2009 to 2014, so not his first, which you'll hear from as a reviewer too, and not his last. I'll be honest, it was hard to figure out what to talk about, but I imagine we all have difficulties when we talk about our advisors. Picking out from the collection of memories, funny, bizarre, or weird things that we did or what we learned about them. But one of the things that kept surfacing for me when I was thinking about what to talk about was our lab group meetings and all the crazy stuff that happened there. And I think this really highlights how Brad is a great person and a great scientist. We were a pretty weird group in 2009, a bunch of hooligans. And everyone was working on totally different systems: sandy coastlines, with and without people, bed forms, rocky coastlines, marshes, deserts, and deltas, using all sorts of methods, but mostly simple models, and maybe complex ones grudgingly. It made for a pretty creative atmosphere. We all had some wild ideas about the way these systems work or how to interpret some model outputs, but even the craziest ideas were treated with respect and never laughed at. Brad might not agree with the idea, but he listened deeply, intensely, to pretty much anything we said, even the ideas that nobody should have to listen to. I'm pretty sure that if you've had the experience in a conversation where people are not, I'm pretty sure you've all had this experience where people are not really listening to what you're saying in a conversation, just waiting for their turn to speak. What I noticed after sitting a while in these meetings was that I don't think Brad was waiting for his turn to speak. He was just staring into your eyes, nodding his head, going like this, and patiently listening. I don't think I've ever met another scientist, let alone a person who listens as well as Brad. These lab group meetings, talks, seminars, whatever, that dude listens hard. Listening, to me, listening is a form of kindness or compassion. And I will always remember this kindness that Brad afforded to me and to us, this deep listening. It means a lot to me. But I'm digressing. Our lab group was very rarely about sharing research. If you're familiar with Brad's work from the outside of the walls of his office, the large space scales, the long time scales, the feedbacks, the self-organization, you may be surprised at what we did on the inside. It's not that we just sat around and pontificated and batted around ideas. No, that was pretty rare. What we really did when I was there was spent years working our way meticulously through Fredso and Dygard, which is a book about sediment transport and fluid mechanics in the boundary layer. So super fast scales, super small scales. We would maybe get through 5 pages a week. In dire moments, we would get through an equation or a plot at a time. Every semester, I remember driving back to school hoping, wishing that Brad would forget we'd been working through the book and it would just stop. But to no avail, we just picked up right where we left off. I think at one particularly harrowing moment, I got really exasperated and asked why we were doing such a ridiculous thing when we all worked on problems at such a drastically larger scale. Brad looked up and smiled. He had been waiting for this for years. And he proceeded to calmly tell me a story of a job interview where he presented his model on rip currents that had absolutely zero fluid mechanics in it. I mean, it was based on rules, yeah, but it was definitely not F equals MA. He proceeded to say how an audience member, a very well-known oceanographer, was increasingly exasperated as the talk went on. How could he be saying all this without at least some real fluid mechanics? Finally, when the talk was over and the questions came at the end of the talk, in Brad's telling of the story, he deftly dealt with the criticism by drawing back on his understanding of fluid mechanics, eventually convincing the oceanographer that it was totally fine to abstract away all of these things and retain the key pieces through rules and feedbacks. The lesson, Brad said, is not that we're reading these books so we can, the lesson is that we're reading the books so that we can ignore them. Ah, the classic lesson, we learn the rules so we can break them. So Brad, thank you for being so kind. Thank you for listening so well, for being such a creative scientist, and for cultivating such a great group of students and collaborators around the world for us to share the nonlinear vibes. I want to give you a very hearty congratulations on the award. It's richly deserved. And reviewer number 2 is...
Yeah, when they picked the order, I didn't realize I was going to be reviewer number 2, but it seems perhaps the most appropriate. And I'm not really prepared either to be giving a Lifetime Achievement Award as Brad's first student either, until I remember some of the stories he would tell, such as things that would blow this Gen Xer's mind, like camping overnight in order to see Led Zeppelin live. So, yeah. I'm Brad's first student. I met him in 1999. And the first thing I remember really from that visit, I visited Duke to see if that's where I was going to go. And we had to go from campus to dinner. And Brad at that time had a Volkswagen camper van, a vintage one, of course, right? So on this trip, I was there with my fiance, now my wife. So she sat in the front because I'm a gentleman. And I sat in the back of the camper van. If you've ever been in one, there's no seats in the middle. So I was sitting in the back with a pile of recycling, well organized, and some hockey gear. And the Volkswagen, if you know, they weren't very reliable, and Brad's not much of a mechanic. So the vehicle, every time it got above 40, would kind of just start lurching around and then go sliding. I'm sitting in the back going, objectively, this is pretty much the worst recruiting trip of all time. But for me, who had been doing engineering, mostly like stormwater ponds and floodplain stuff, at that moment, I was like, this is actually the perfect way to recruit me. for a different life in which I thought as a working engineer, you have to be kind of prim a certain way in order to be successful. And here's Brad showing me you can be successful and also be yourself and more honest to your core principles. So that was a great way to get to know Brad as well. I also probably overestimated how much money an assistant professor made at the time too. So I went to Duke, sorry, Pat. So the first year I was there, Brad had a class in the spring, I was his first student. He was a graduate level course, which was called, What is Andrew Gonna Do for Graduate School? That's not what he called it, but that's what he said it was. And these are the subjects that the class went through. Marshes, which became the work of Matt Kerwin. The features formerly known as rippled scour depressions, which Brad worked on, and Evan, Giovanni Coco, and many other people worked on his models of that, as well as shorelines. Rocky shorelines was kind of interesting. Pat Limber took that one, and I ended up doing sandy shorelines. That worked out pretty well for me as well. So, also on that trip, it was the first time I interacted with Brad face to face. There's no Zoom back then either. And this gets to Evan's point is that we would sit there and there was a lot of silence. I kind of thought it was because I'd never met someone from the Midwest before that closely. But it's just kind of Brad. And the first time my wife saw us interacting, she was like, what is wrong with you? And it's because I had never had someone pay so much attention to the words that came out of my mouth. And for those of you that know me, a lot of nonsense comes out of my mouth. And that's after knowing Brad. So just project that hindcast that one. So I learned how to be a little bit more careful about what I say, but that also transfers to the written word as well, right? So I wish I had brought it as a prop, but when I gave Brad my first draft of a manuscript, which of course is printed out and hand annotated, as he maybe still does now, I don't know. It came back covered with ink. Fortunately, you didn't use red ink, but there wasn't much of the margins left in this double space thing until I flipped through a couple pages. And then page 4, there was a paragraph just left untouched. And I was really excited until I looked closer and there was just an X through the entirety of the paragraph. So my first PhD students, Aleja and Yap, are laughing over here. So that's where that came from. And I'm sorry about that as well. So you think someone that was so careful with the written word would care more about grammar as well. But there are other subjects Brad was less attentive to, right? One of them being punctuation, which is kind of strange, especially. These next two are very strange for someone who's really interested in modeling as well. One is punctuation, and Brad has favorites, those being the semicolon and the em dash. And he's one of the few people that can have a paragraph with more semicolons and periods. So the period can suffer in that one. And the second is spelling. So TAing his classes, I would see some atrocities up on the board. Famously, the rippled scour depression paper, which was about the difference between fine-grained and coarse-grained paper. At the time, Brad didn't really understand that coarse sediment is spelled with an A and not a U. And the word shadows has only one D. And if anyone has looked into the CEM source code, you will see that I propagated Brad's spelling of shadows throughout the entire comment section of that code as well. So that's enough of the roast. So I'm very fortunate to have Brad as an advisor. My 4th year of graduate school, I had a kid, and Brad was still a single guy, but he was very, and then when I had to change my schedule and things were kind of coming a bit late, Brad was very forgiving about all those changes. So thank you. And then we fast forward, right, 2007, Laura Moore asked me if I want to run the AGU session on coastal geomorphology. And everything went great. And then as we do, we went out afterwards. Laura kind of joins our group and Brad started acting really weird. I was like, what is Brad doing? And now we know what that was all about. So, and I believe his family's on Zoom with us now. So thanks for your work on Brad too. And now when I talk to Brad about family and other things, not only is he forgiving, but he's also understanding about that balance between work and life as well. And he has a lovely family too. So this is the Systems Award. So Brad served in many ways, as Greg talked, for systems, but there's also one about science, right? And I think we know the key thing that Brad has kind of really accomplished is taking very simple ideas, right? And then extending them to help us understand how the Earth works. You could kind of even look around the room. There's one poster here that has Brad on it, right? And it has a very simple plots and some very simple things on there. It actually has quite a lot. It's kind of busy, Brad, actually, but it also has some arrows. And now you finally figured out how to write an arrow instead of just a dash and a thing, which used to be in his talks a lot. But this fundamental way to take something simple, right, and then understand how the earth works is really kind of the core of what Brad has given us. And sometimes I think that really all this interest in computers and other things, so the simulations running in Brad's mind can be expressed in the outside world, right? And sometimes checked by a second system, right, which would be our computers and our models and other things like that. Such that if something unexpected happens in a model like flying spits, Brad can then adjust his own simulations, right, and then fully understand what's going on in that system as well. So thank you for that, and thank you for everything you've given to us in science. All right. So I think I've gone over time, right, which is kind of ironic because however many years ago, we went through that slide pretty quickly. Brad took me to the bowels of the Millennium Hotel, sorry, the Millennium Harvest House Hotel, RIP, and we had to practice his presentation for his advisor, Chris Payola, who, yeah, so I'm not done yet. Right? So I do have to go off the stage. Right? Who I'm excited about. He's a former graduate of the MIT Hui Joint Program, which is where my students graduate from now as well. Now, just always remember a while back when Chris was doing NSED, the National Center for Earth Surface Dynamics, which is kind of a precursor to this. I was invited to the summer program, which is kind of a precursor to some of the things that goes on in ESPN. And I was going to give a talk. I talked about some deltas. I'm sure I talked about some spits. And Chris was like, no, it'd be fun. We're in Sappho, so let's just go down, put some sand in one of the wave flumes and see what happens. I'm like, Chris, I am not an experimentalist. I have no idea what's going to happen. And Chris just looked at me and said, what would failure look like? And I think that's just a great way to think about all the travails we have, that nature is always right and we can learn from it. And it'll teach us the lessons that we just need to understand for ourselves. So Chris, apparently I've inherited your back problems as well. So. All right.
Sorry, I need this prop. I'm older than the Pope now. So my memory gets to have a cane. Ay. Thanks to all. And thanks to Greg, particularly for pressing me a little bit. Now, where is Bradshaw? I can't see that. Well, there he is. What an honor and a pleasure it is to be here, to share this with you, and not just this moment, but all that the moment needs. For the rest of you, can you imagine starting out at the beginning of your career having Brad Murray for a grad student? Just think about that for a second. Talk about winning the lottery. Sorry? Oh, all right. All right, I'll say it again. Can you imagine what it would be like to have Brad Murray at the beginning of your career as a graduate student? I really, especially in retrospect, I realize I really won the lottery on that one. So Brad ended up working with me through some complicated braided pattern involving, I believe, journalism, if I remember right, and physics at the U of M. I didn't know about the Led Zeppelin, but also lots of time outdoors. And at the end of it, looking back, I realize it's kind of a cliche anymore to say that your young researchers teach you more than you could ever teach them. But I'm sorry that it's a cliche, because in Brad's case, it's really true. One trivial example that I'll give you is that through his journalism background, Brad taught me how to properly, journalistically, edit a paper, and I've been doing it ever since. So still at it, Brad, trying to get it right. A little more broadly, so yesterday I was talking with Paola Pasalacqua, and you both mentioned these silences. Well, Paola said, so how did you and Brad actually talk to each other, since you're both So introversion. That's a great question. I'd never thought about it before. But the fact of the matter is that not only did we talk to each other a lot, but we argued a lot. And they were very spirited, energetic arguments. And to a large extent, they were about philosophy. They were about not the formal philosophy of science, but the big picture of how you go about understanding nature and how you make predictions and how you test them, and just what this whole enterprise that we're doing is all about. Let me tell you, for any of the young faculty, it was a pain in the neck sometimes. It was hard. And I'm sure it was hard for you too. But let me tell you, especially for the younger researchers out there, thank your lucky stars if you have a graduate student who wants to talk philosophy with you and argue these points. It's really important. Well, I think that passion to really get to the essence of things is at the core of who Brad is as a scientist, and it's a large part of why we're here now doing this. After leaving Minnesota, he expanded greatly, moving on to the beautiful work that you're all familiar with on self-organized coastline patterns, to all kinds of things that I certainly would never have predicted, involving seagrass and human beings and complex interactions between physical surface processes and all the other things that go into it. He's been a leader in that throughout his career, and it's just been amazing from a distance to watch it all happen. But throughout that, there's a hallmark to Brad's work, I think. It's always rigorously mechanistic. His background in physics is always there, shining through, making fun of fluid mechanics or not. And yet his work is shot through with a very distinctive, I would say almost artistic genius that really, I think, is unmistakable. So it's time to close. And I think now it would be traditional to close with a statement along the lines of how proud I am of Brad. And I am bursting beyond my ability to express with the emotion people are getting at. But in my view, it has nothing to do with pride. I was incredibly lucky to just remain in Brad's orbit over these years. And I still feel that way now. So it's not pride, Brad. But what I have for you is, it's an unlimited abundance of admiration, of gratitude, and of genuine affection. Thanks. And congratulations.
So I think it's unanimous, no revisions required. Come on up, Brad. We have a couple of small things for you. So, of course, you have something to hang on your wall. But another thing that we know about Brad is that he likes to meditate. It's good practice. And so we thought, well, how can we honor the meditative nature and the deeply thoughtful nature of Brad's science and contributions? So we thought a meditation cushion might be nice.
Solid earth.
And I believe there's a
Nama systems.
so
Thank you.
go back.
Thank you. I thought I was going to have to give a rebuttal. The only thing I'll say is fluid dynamics mattered in that case, and that model was wrong. But, well, thank you. So many thank yous, starting with the awards committee. I couldn't be more touched. And Evan, Andrew, Chris, I have to stop crying to come up here. I couldn't be more touched and honored. And I'm the lucky one in all sorts of stages along the way, starting with the amazing fortune to have the opportunity to work with Chris. And I suspect I'm still really difficult to deal with, but I know I was then. The patience and the, the grace you had to let me work on whatever I wanted to, which was a bunch of crazy stuff that mostly went nowhere, and that couldn't have been more fortunate. And to have my first, best, closest mentor and father figure in my life has been instrumental in so many ways in my life, way beyond science. And I thought I learned to write papers from you. So, and I know that that easy, no, but I learned so much about science and writing. And yeah, I thought I was learning from you. And I got really, really lucky too to get to work with BT Werner after that as a postdoc. And BT also just super generously let me work on whatever I wanted to. Has supported me as Chris supported me, not just but um, following whatever paths seemed fun. And then I got the fortune to go to Duke, and Peter Half was a great mentor. Peter left us last year. He was at the heart of those unconventional lab meetings, and got to do some really fun modeling work with Peter, and so many other people that I've been super lucky to work with. That I'll be here all night, and we don't want to miss posters, but the anthropomorphodynamic work has led to the opportunity to start rubbing elbows with the real world a bit. And for that, I have a lot of colleagues to thank, including Catherine and Artie, and very especially, my closest collaborator, wherever the camera is, and partner in life, Laura Moore, who's leading the foray into the real world of stakeholders and strong opinions beyond science. And I've been really, really fortunate too to be part of this systems community over so many years. That systems community is so supportive and fun and buoying in so many ways. So thank you to all the people that started systems up, Jaya Savitsky, of course, and Pat Weiberg and Chris, Dave Furbish, Rudy Slinger, and so many others who were instrumental in getting it going. And thank you, Jaya, for inviting me to volunteer, to work in the middle of Sister, to be closely involved in systems starting in the early years. And thank you, Greg, for inviting me to volunteer some more later on. And it's just been a wonderful place. Now, I heard something about a champion of open software, et cetera. Come on, man, most of the problems that systems is trying to solve has been me over my career. I wrote software that would have looked like a caveman had written it, a cave person. Had anybody seen it, which with a few exceptions, nobody would, because you wouldn't show that to anybody. And findable and accessible, absolutely. I know the floppy disks are in boxes on high shelves, and I haven't erased any file system. So in theory, I could find and access any of that, and I'm happy to share it. No, happy isn't the right word. I have that sharing didn't come up back in those days. So I'm just thrilled to see what systems has turned into over the years. So way beyond my expectations, any of our expectations, I think, and all of you young people that now take us into the world of best practices that are so much better. Science is so much better for it, and the community that's involved in doing science together and doing community science has just been a blast to be part of. So thank you all from the bottom of my heart and the middle of my heart and all the edges. And thank you.
Okay, let's give Brad one more round of congratulations.